Welcome to Chapter 2, Legislative Framework. We're going to talk about the health and safety rights granted to workers in Canada, and we'll talk about some of the regulations, and the nature and the limits placed on work refusals and work stoppages. So there was an update to WHMIS in 2015, and we'll go through some of that. We'll talk about how occupational health and safety fits into the criminal code, which, as I mentioned in lecture number 1, means that people can be jailed, not just fined, and how there needs to be concern about how it affects the environment and the transportation of dangerous goods. I believe all cities, including Portage la Prairie, would have a dangerous goods route. I know the city of Winnipeg would. That if you have some chemicals, I don't even know what an example, like perhaps hydrochloric acid, you can't just be going down Portage and Main in Winnipeg. What you need to do is there's a dangerous goods route, and you need to literally follow that. If not, you will be heavily fined. So you can see there's federal, provincial, and territorial laws, regulations, guidelines, standards, and codes can get very complex. So it allows workers the right to refuse unsafe work. We talked about that. Protection of workers from reprisals, no repercussions. And again, the duties and responsibilities assigned to the employers and others, including the employee. So you can see in Manitoba, it's called the Workplace Safety and Health Act, and it's enforced by Safe Manitoba. So you can see all jurisdictions have an act or legislation, and there's also a responsible government agency to make sure that it's actually being complied with. So it sets minimum standards, and there can be perhaps some exclusions with that. Again, the emphasis is on the employers to take every reasonable precaution to ensure employee safety. So things like guardrails on a walkway, make sure that the walkway is solid and as it gets inspected, things along that line. So take every reasonable precaution. Appoint a competent supervisor. Some of you in this room, and at a future point, you may be responsible for occupational health and safety for your company. This would be something that I would look at a graduate from Red River, especially if they're an HR person, which I believe some of you are going into, to say, oh, you just took a course in workplace health and safety. We want you to sit on the committee, and in a year from now, we want you to chair that committee. So very major responsibility. You need to be able to post the act in the workplace in various forms these days, and you need to review the policy at least annually. And also violence. I mentioned earlier that there was a situation where an employee tried to run another employee over with a forklift. Many years ago at the mine, there were 2 employees, the mine back in my hometown of Flin Flon. There were 2 employees who did not get along, and management just kind of like shrugged their shoulders and said, whatever, these 2 people just don't like each other. Well, one day, one of the employees took a crowbar and attacked the other employee, and I'll leave the story there because it gets rather graphic. But after that, management said, well, if we got 2 employees who really hate each other, we can put them on different shifts. All right. So we don't want this tragedy to ever happen again. Harassment is also part of it too. People picking on each other, or, not just, it can be banter, but it can also be harassment. I know there was a person in our group at SAIT as part of supply chain, and he was the person that the rest of us didn't like. And I even asked my boss one day after taking some like respect in the workplace, I said, are we bullying this person? Like, are we being mean to this person? And and I thought, maybe some of the comments I'd even made were like borderline or over the line. And so you need to have respect for your the your workers, your co-workers. Supervisor is somebody who's in charge and has authority over a worker. A boss, a foreperson, all right, or team lead, whatever you want to call them. That person needs to know about workplace health and safety. All right. Make sure again that people are following it. You can see all three of these people are wearing hard hats. One gentleman has on the warning visor, etc. What type of even footwear they're supposed to wear. And again, reasonable precautions is a major theme. Also reporting hazards such as defective equipment, any contraventions of the act, and employees have a responsibility to follow these rules too. They could put themselves and others at danger if they're not using the safety equipment properly. And I know in some cases, that comes to mind that firefighters, I believe, that people in firefighters are not allowed to have beards for the purpose of the mask will not adhere to your face. And so they're not, there's even a commercial on TV where they're literally supposed to shave every day. And so because of, it would be a workplace health and safety issue. Maybe never even thought about shaving as a workplace health and safety issue. And yes, it's so they can be used properly. Now, it's required by law. There's an internal responsibility, and also to provide a collaborative, not an adversarial atmosphere between labor and management. And again, joint health and safety committee. So you recognize the hazard, risk assessments, keep record keeping. And I know that even in an office setting, and I shared with you in class one time, I had a few books sitting on top of a bookshelf. I got a note from occupational health and safety to move the books, that it was considered a hazard, that they could fall off and injure somebody. Personally, I thought it was kind of like ludicrous, but I did what I was told. I moved the books from the top of the shelf, put them on the shelf properly, and let them know that I had complied with that. And they do. They take it seriously. So maybe that's a bit of a stretch, that a couple of books could fall off and hurt somebody. I'm not exactly sure what would be the worst case, but if they say that's a hazard, maybe the person would then trip and hit their head against the desk. I mean, you can go on and on. If that's what they say, then that's the rules you need to follow. Right? Again, different jurisdictions. You can see that you must have one in Manitoba if you have 20 employees or more, that you must have a joint health and safety committee, and you need to, again, keep records of this. Right? So there's various, so 20 employees or more, you must have joint health and safety committee. So that means that the Red River campus in Portage la Prairie would have more than 20 employees. They need to have a committee like this. And again, the right to refuse work. We've talked about that already. You don't have the right to refuse if it's part of the normal condition, and if it puts another person's life in jeopardy. So if you don't do something, the other person's life becomes in jeopardy. There's sometimes jobs that require 2 or perhaps more people. The right to stop work in dangerous circumstances. You can see the Ontario definition. WHMIS in 1988, which we already talked about, identifying material safety data sheets, outlining the product's potentially hazardous ingredients, even things like toner cartridges, and let alone some, like say some acid, acids, chemicals, or anything along this line that you might have. You needed to have material safety data sheets and employee training. I remember going through the training myself and having, we had to identify the chemicals that were hazardous. And in industrial settings, in a kitchen, say a nursing home, which is where I was in 1988, you would have situations where, they have industrial chemicals for sterilizing, etc. So it's not like you just got, and bleach can be very dangerous, but you have very toxic items in an industrial setting for cleaning. Right. In 2015, Canada joined the Global Harmonization System, and so that it would be more of a worldwide, rather than just a Canada-only or specific type of information system. New classes and new labels, all right, for the safety data sheets. And there will be also a transition to 2018, which we are past, so this has already occurred. And in this case, West Ray Mine, that killed 26 miners. It was considered to be corporate negligence. And so, again, criminal code, the executives more accountable when workers are killed or injured. Again, some of these executives or senior management or owners of companies are so wealthy that finding them is almost a joke. It's certainly not going to change their behavior, and they just view it as a price of doing business. Same as perhaps some long-haul truckers view getting fined for speeding a cost of business. So you can see the protests, right? Make the company more responsible for overseeing day-to-day operations. Make them criminally responsible, which again means they can be jailed. And not taking action, the consequences of that. Again, criminal lack of care or criminal negligence just really ups it from fines. People, if you take away their freedom to somebody who's a multimillionaire, that means a lot more to them than fining them. And that's what's starting to happen. More so, taking away like a rich person's freedom for whatever period of time by putting them in jail makes them think and be more cognizant of what's going on and realize the consequences. I'll pay a fine, but we made more money, so don't really care what happened to that person. Just the price of doing business. So again, you can read this as far as the release of a hazardous substance in a non-residential building follows under the authority of the health and safety legislation. And again, if it's outside of the building, it falls under the jurisdiction of environmental. So, and again, both the parties may have jurisdiction on it. And again, if you have some sort of, say, gas that's being released in the building, but it also leaks to the outside, you would have both legislations that affect it. Right? Transportation. I do know that the transportation of dangerous goods, whether they be radioactive or biochemical or anything along that line, anything that's considered to be a dangerous good, has severe restrictions on literally where it can go. And in case there is an accident. and it's very closely regulated, and there would be some pretty heavy penalties if you were to violate those rules. So you might have to go out of your way to go around town rather than going through the main street of that town. But let's say there was an accident and all of a sudden there was a tanker truck that's in the middle of downtown Portage la Prairie, and it could be catastrophic. Still can be catastrophic when it's told to go around, but there should be fewer people and less chance for a large number of people to be hurt or severely injured. So that's the end of chapter number 2.